I never thought my snowplow would become the most controversial piece of equipment in Meadowbrook Heights, Minnesota, but Karen Hutchins made sure of that within my first winter in the neighborhood. The whole mess started on a crisp November morning when I was out clearing my driveway after the first decent snowfall of the season. I had just moved into this subdivision outside of Rochester 3 months earlier, and I was genuinely excited about my new John Deere plow attachment. Growing up in northern Minnesota, I learned early that a good snowplow was worth its weight in gold during the brutal winters. My father had taught me how to operate one when I was 16, and now at 34, I took pride in maintaining my own equipment. I was halfway through clearing my driveway when I noticed a white Lexus pulling up to the curb. A woman in her mid-50s stepped out, wearing a puffy winter coat that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Her blonde hair was styled in that specific way that screamed she had a standing appointment at an expensive salon. She marched across my front lawn, leaving footprints in the fresh snow, and planted herself directly in front of my plow. I killed the engine and climbed down from the cab, figuring she was a neighbor coming to introduce herself. I was wrong. "Excuse me," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut through the cold air. "I am Karen Hutchins, president of the Meadowbrook Heights Homeowners Association, and I need to speak with you about that monstrosity you are operating." I looked back at my perfectly maintained snowplow, then back at her. "My snowplow, is there a problem?" "A problem?" She let out a laugh that had no humor in it. "That industrial equipment is completely inappropriate for a residential neighborhood. It is loud, unsightly, and quite frankly, it lowers the aesthetic value of our community. I am going to have to insist that you cease and desist immediately." I took a deep breath, reminding myself to stay calm. "Mrs. Hutchins, with all due respect, I need to clear my driveway. We just got 8 inches of snow and I have to get to work." "Then hire a professional snow removal service like everyone else in this neighborhood," she snapped. "Or use a snow blower, a hand shovel even, but that industrial plow has got to go." "I am not breaking any laws," I replied, keeping my voice level. "This is my property and I have every right to maintain it as I see fit." Her eyes narrowed into slits. "Everything in this neighborhood falls under HOA jurisdiction, Mr. Brennan. Jake Brennan. Mr. Brennan. You signed the HOA covenant when you purchased your home. That gives us authority over what you can and cannot do on your property. I will be sending you a formal cease and desist letter by the end of the day. If you continue to operate that plow, you will face daily fines of $200. She turned on her heel and walked back to her Lexus, leaving me standing there in disbelief. I had read through the HOA documents when I bought the house, but I did not remember anything about snowplows. Then again, the covenant was about 70 pages long, written in dense legal language that could put anyone to sleep. That evening, true to her word, I found an official-looking letter in my mailbox. It cited Section 14, Paragraph 8 of the HOA covenant, which stated that no commercial or industrial equipment shall be operated on residential properties, except by licensed contractors during reasonable hours. The letter demanded that I immediately stop using my snowplow or face escalating fines and potential legal action. I sat at my kitchen table, reading through my copy of the HOA covenant with a fine-tooth comb. The section she cited was clearly meant to prevent people from running actual businesses out of their homes, but Karen was twisting it to suit her agenda. The more I read, the angrier I got. I had spent $15,000 on this house's snowplow setup, and I was not about to let some power-hungry HOA president tell me I could not use it. The next morning, I decided to call a lawyer. My buddy from college, Marcus, practiced real estate law in Minneapolis, and he agreed to look over my documents. 3 days later, he called me back with good news. "Jake, she is reaching," Marcus said. "That clause is about commercial operations. You are not running a snow removal business. You are maintaining your own property with your own equipment. Unless the covenant specifically prohibits snowplows, which it does not, she has no legal ground to stand on. So I can keep using it. Absolutely. But here is the thing, these HOA disputes can get messy. Even if you are legally in the right, she can make your life difficult with constant complaints and frivolous fines. My advice: send her a formal response from a lawyer, which I will draft for you, and then document everything. Every time you use the plow, every interaction with the HOA, everything." I took his advice. The letter went out the following week, politely but firmly explaining that I was within my rights to use my snowplow and that any further harassment would result in legal action against the HOA for overreach. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong again. Karen responded by calling an emergency HOA board meeting. She sent out notices to all the residents, claiming that I was defying community standards and creating a dangerous precedent. The meeting was scheduled for a Thursday evening in the community clubhouse, and I made sure to attend. The clubhouse was packed when I arrived. Apparently, Karen had rallied quite a few supporters, mostly older residents who seemed to think my snowplow was somehow going to destroy property values. I recognized a few of my neighbors who gave me sympathetic looks, but they stayed quiet. Karen stood at the front of the room behind a podium, looking like she was about to address Congress. The other board members sat at a table beside her. Richard Morton, the treasurer, who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. Susan Palmer, the secretary, who nodded along with everything Karen said. And David Chen, a board member who actually seemed to be paying attention. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Karen began. "We are here to address a serious issue that threatens the character of our neighborhood. Mr. Brennan has refused to comply with our cease and desist order regarding his industrial snowplow. This is not just about one resident's equipment. This is about maintaining the standards that make Meadowbrook Heights the premier subdivision in Rochester." Someone in the back shouted their agreement. I raised my hand. "Yes, Mr. Brennan," Karen said, her tone dripping with false politeness. I stood up. "I would like to know exactly which rule I am breaking. My lawyer reviewed the covenant, and there is nothing that prohibits me from using a snowplow on my own property for personal use. The covenant clearly states that commercial and industrial operations are prohibited," I interrupted. "I am not running a business. I am clearing my own driveway. There is a significant difference." David Chen leaned forward. "He has a point, Karen. That clause is about commercial operations. If he is just maintaining his property, I do not see how we can. The spirit of the rule is what matters," Karen cut in. "We cannot have residents operating heavy machinery whenever they feel like it. What is next? Someone decides to park a semi-truck in their driveway. Someone sets up an excavator to dig a pool. Those are false equivalences," I said. "A snowplow is standard equipment for property maintenance in Minnesota. Half the people in this room probably have riding lawn mowers, which are also considered machinery. Should we ban those too?" That got a few murmurs of agreement from the crowd. Karen's face was turning red. "This is exactly the kind of disrespect I am talking about," she said. "Mr. Brennan clearly has no regard for this community or its standards. I move that we implement a new rule specifically prohibiting the use of personal snowplows in Meadowbrook Heights. You cannot just make up rules because one person is doing something you do not like," I argued. "We can implement new rules as the board sees fit," Karen shot back. "All in favor?" Susan Palmer's hand shot up immediately. Richard Morton hesitated, then slowly raised his. David Chen kept his hand down. "The motion passes," Karen announced. "Effective immediately, personal snowplows are prohibited in Meadowbrook Heights. Mr. Brennan, you will receive an updated notice tomorrow morning. Any violations will result in a $200 daily fine." I left that meeting furious. This was not just about the snowplow anymore. This was about Karen exercising power for the sake of power. I called Marcus again that night. "She cannot do that, can she?" I asked. "Well, technically HOAs do have the authority to implement new rules," Marcus explained, "but there are procedures they have to follow. They need to give proper notice, allow for a comment period, and the rule has to be reasonable. Banning snowplows in Minnesota is arguably unreasonable. Did she follow proper procedure? She called an emergency meeting and had them vote on it immediately." That is your angle. They did not follow proper procedure. I can draft another letter explaining that the rule change is invalid. But Jake, I have to tell you, these fights can get expensive. HOAs have legal funds for this kind of thing. Are you prepared for a potentially long battle? I thought about it. I thought about my dad teaching me to plow snow in our old driveway up in Bemidji. I thought about the principle of the thing, about not letting bullies win just because they had a title and a gavel. "Yeah," I said. "I am prepared." The letter went out, and I continued using my snowplow. Every time it snowed, I cleared my driveway, and every time I did, I received another fine notice from the HOA. I documented everything, taking photos and videos, keeping every piece of correspondence. The fines added up quickly, $200 a day whenever I used the plow. Within a month, they claimed I owed them over $3,000. December arrived with typical Minnesota fury. We got hit with storm after storm, and I dutifully cleared my driveway after each one. My neighbors started to notice something interesting. My driveway was always clear within an hour of the snow stopping, while everyone else was waiting for the professional snow removal services that Karen insisted everyone use. Those services were overwhelmed, often taking a full day or more to get to people's houses. One morning, my neighbor Tom Radcliffe knocked on my door. He was in his late 60s, a retired engineer who had lived in the neighborhood for 15 years. "Jake, I have been watching this whole thing with the HOA," he said. "I think what Karen is doing is ridiculous. I wanted you to know that a bunch of us are planning to attend the next board meeting to support you." "I appreciate that, Tom," I said. "But I do not want to cause problems for everyone else." "You are not causing problems. Karen is. She has been drunk on power ever since she became president 3 years ago. Someone needs to stand up to her, and I am glad it is you." That conversation lifted my spirits more than he knew. Over the next week, several other neighbors stopped by to express their support. Apparently, Karen's iron-fisted approach to HOA management had rubbed a lot of people the wrong way over the years, and my snowplow dispute was becoming a rallying point for general frustration. The next board meeting was scheduled for mid-December. I showed up with Marcus, who agreed to attend as my legal representation. Tom and about a dozen other neighbors came too, which was apparently unheard of for a regular HOA meeting. Karen looked surprised when she saw the crowd, but she quickly composed herself. "Well, this is quite the turnout. Let us begin with the usual business. First, the treasurer's report. I would like to address the snowplow ban," I interrupted. Karen's jaw tightened. "That is not on the agenda." "Then I would like to add it to the agenda," I said. "Or do residents not have the right to raise issues at board meetings?" David Chen spoke up. "Actually, Karen, the bylaws do allow for residents to bring up new business. I think we should hear him out." Karen looked like she had just bitten into a lemon. "Fine. Mr. Brennan, you have 5 minutes." Marcus stood up instead. "My name is Marcus Thompson, and I am Mr. Brennan's legal counsel. I am here to inform the board that the snowplow ban implemented last month is invalid for several reasons. First, proper procedure was not followed. The bylaws require a 30-day notice period before any new rules can be voted on, along with a comment period for residents. None of that happened. Second, the ban is unreasonable and arbitrary. Snowplows are standard equipment for property maintenance in Minnesota. Banning them serves no legitimate purpose and actually harms residents by forcing them to rely on third-party services during a time when those services are completely overwhelmed. The ban is about maintaining community standards, Karen argued. Community standards are not violated by a resident maintaining their property, Marcus countered. Furthermore, we are prepared to file a lawsuit against the HOA for harassment, overreach, and violation of its own bylaws. Mr. Brennan has documented extensive evidence of the board's improper conduct. I strongly suggest that the board rescind this ban immediately before this becomes a costly legal matter. The room went silent. Richard Morton shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Susan Palmer looked at Karen for guidance. David Chen was nodding slowly. "I agree with the lawyer," David said. "Karen, we rushed this through without following proper procedure. We need to rescind it." "We will do no such thing," Karen snapped. "This is about maintaining order and standards." "If we back down now, what kind of precedent does that set?" Tom Radcliffe stood up. "Karen, I have been in this neighborhood for 15 years. I have watched you turn this HOA into your personal fiefdom. You fine people for having their garbage cans visible from the street. You sent violation notices to the Johnsons because their Christmas lights were the wrong color. You tried to ban kids from playing basketball in their own driveways because the noise annoyed you. Enough is enough. We are not your subjects. We are homeowners who pay HOA dues for legitimate services, not so you can play dictator." Several people applauded. Karen's face turned purple. "How dare you?" she hissed. "I have devoted countless hours to improving this neighborhood. Everything I do is for the benefit of this community." "Then prove it," I said. "Rescind the ban. Admit you overreached. Show us that you actually care about what is fair and right, not just about asserting control." For a moment, I thought she might actually explode. Instead, she grabbed her papers, stuffed them into her bag, and stormed out of the meeting. We all sat there in stunned silence. David Chen cleared his throat. "Well, as the acting chair in Karen's absence, I move that we rescind the snowplow ban on the grounds that proper procedure was not followed." "All in favor?" 3 hands went up, David's, Richard's, and surprisingly Susan's. "The motion passes," David said. "Mr. Brennan, I apologize for this whole mess. You are free to use your snowplow without penalty. We will also void all the fines that were assessed." I felt a wave of relief wash over me. "Thank you. I appreciate that." The meeting wrapped up quickly after that. Several neighbors came up to congratulate me and Marcus. Tom shook my hand vigorously. "You did good, kid. Someone needed to put her in her place." I thought that was the end of it. The ban was lifted, the fines were voided, and life could go back to normal. But I underestimated just how vindictive Karen Hutchins could be. 2 days after the meeting, I received a call from the Rochester Police Department. Apparently, Karen had filed a complaint claiming that I had been threatening her. The officer on the phone sounded skeptical, but he asked me to come down to the station to give a statement. I brought Marcus with me, and we spent an hour explaining the entire situation to a detective named Sarah Williams. I showed her all my documentation, the letters, the meeting minutes, everything. She listened carefully, taking notes. "So let me get this straight," Detective Williams said. "You have never threatened Mrs. Hutchins in any way?" "Never," I confirmed. "Every interaction I have had with her has been documented. My lawyer has been present for several of them. I have witnesses to everything. And she has been fining you for using a snowplow on your own property." "That is correct, until the board meeting 2 days ago when the ban was rescinded." Detective Williams sat back in her chair. "Mr. Brennan, I am going to be honest with you. This sounds like a civil dispute that has nothing to do with criminal law. Mrs. Hutchins seems to be misusing the police department to harass you. I am going to note in my report that there is no evidence of any criminal activity on your part. If she continues to file false reports, she could be charged with making false statements to police." That was reassuring, but it also showed me just how far Karen was willing to go. Over the next few weeks, life in Meadowbrook Heights became increasingly tense. Karen apparently resigned as HOA president after the meeting, but she was still living in the neighborhood, and she made sure to glare at me every time our paths crossed. December turned into January, and the Minnesota winter showed no signs of letting up. The Weather Service started warning about a major blizzard system moving in from the Dakotas. They were predicting up to 2 feet of snow over a 48-hour period, with winds gusting up to 50 miles per hour. It was going to be one of the worst storms in years. I spent the day before the storm preparing. I made sure my snowplow was in perfect working order, stocked up on fuel, and filled my pantry with supplies. My neighbors were doing the same, though most of them were relying on the professional snow removal services to handle the aftermath. The storm hit on a Friday night with a vengeance. The wind howled like a living thing, and the snow came down so thick you could not see more than a few feet in front of you. I watched from my living room window as the drifts piled higher and higher. By Saturday morning, the entire neighborhood was buried under nearly 20 inches of snow, and it was still coming down. I knew I could not plow until the storm actually stopped because the wind would just fill everything back in within minutes. So I waited, monitoring the weather reports. The storm finally began to taper off Saturday evening, leaving behind a winter wonderland that was beautiful and completely impassable. Sunday morning, I got up early and fired up my snowplow. The sun was just starting to rise, casting an orange glow over the buried neighborhood. I started with my own driveway, carefully clearing a path from my garage to the street. The snow was heavy and wet, perfect packing snow, and it took me about an hour to finish. When I was done, I looked around at the neighborhood. Every driveway was completely blocked. Several cars were buried up to their door handles. The street itself had been plowed by the city, but the plow had left massive berms at the end of everyone's driveway, making it impossible to get out without some serious digging. As I was putting away my equipment, Tom Radcliffe appeared at the end of my driveway, trudging through the snow. He looked exhausted. "Jake, I hate to ask this, but is there any chance you could help me clear my driveway? The snow removal service I hired is saying they cannot get to me until Tuesday at the earliest. My wife has a doctor's appointment tomorrow that she cannot miss, and I just do not think I can shovel all this by hand. I will pay you whatever you want." I did not even hesitate. "I will do it for free, Tom. Give me 20 minutes to warm up with some coffee and I will be over." His face lit up with relief. "Thank you, Jake. I really appreciate it." I spent the rest of the morning helping Tom, and then word started to spread. Other neighbors began appearing, asking if I could help them too. By noon, I had cleared 6 driveways and I had a list of 8 more people who needed help. Everyone offered to pay me, but I refused. These were my neighbors, and they had supported me during the HOA dispute. It felt good to help them out. Around 2 in the afternoon, while I was clearing the driveway of a young couple who had just had a baby, I saw Karen Hutchins standing at the end of her driveway. Her property was 4 houses down from mine, and it was completely buried. Her white Lexus was barely visible under a mountain of snow. She was on her phone, clearly agitated about something. I ignored her and kept working. When I finished with the young couple's driveway, I moved on to the next one on my list, which happened to be right across the street from Karen's house. As I was working, I could hear her shouting into her phone. "What do you mean you cannot get here until Wednesday? That is completely unacceptable. I have been a loyal customer for 3 years. I need my driveway cleared today." She must have hung up in frustration because she suddenly stormed across the street toward me. I kept plowing, pretending I had not noticed her. "Excuse me." She shouted over the noise of my equipment. I stopped and looked at her. She was wearing the same expensive coat, but now she looked frazzled. Her hair was not perfectly styled and she had dark circles under her eyes. "Yes," I said neutrally. "I need you to clear my driveway," she said. It was not a request, it was a demand. I stared at her for a long moment, letting the silence stretch out. "No," her mouth fell open. "What?" I said no. "You spent 2 months trying to ban me from using this plow. You filed false police reports against me. You made my life miserable because you could not stand the idea of someone not following your orders. Now you want me to help you? Absolutely not." "I will pay you," she said quickly. $300. Cash. This is not about money, Karen. This is about principle. You treated me like garbage and now you want my help because it is convenient for you. That is not how this works." Her expression shifted from demanding to desperate. "Please. I need to get out. I have appointments. I have responsibilities." "Should have thought about that before you tried to ban snowplows," I said, and I went back to work. She stood there for a moment, then stormed back to her house. I felt a little guilty, but mostly I felt satisfied. Sometimes people need to face the consequences of their actions. Over the next few days, I helped more than 20 families clear their driveways. The professional snow removal services were completely overwhelmed, and it became clear that the massive storm had exposed a real problem in the neighborhood. People had become too dependent on outside services without having any backup plan. Karen's driveway remained buried. I would see her occasionally, digging away with a shovel, making painfully slow progress. Part of me felt bad for her, but a larger part remembered how she had treated me and thought she was getting exactly what she deserved. On Wednesday afternoon, about 4 days after the storm, I was sitting in my living room when I heard a knock at my door. I opened it to find David Chen standing there. "Hey, David, what can I do for you? Can I come in?" he asked. "I want to talk to you about something." I invited him in and made us both coffee. We sat at my kitchen table and David looked uncomfortable. "Look, Jake, I know things got really messy with the HOA and Karen. I just want you to know that the rest of the board did not support how she handled things. We have been trying to run the HOA more reasonably since she resigned." "I appreciate that," I said. "The thing is, this storm has shown us something important. A lot of people in the neighborhood are stuck. The professional services cannot keep up with demand, especially during major storms. You have been helping people out with your plow, which is amazing, but it made me think. What if we actually contracted with you to provide snow removal services for the common areas? The clubhouse parking lot, the entrance to the neighborhood, things like that. We could pay you a fair rate and it would help everyone out." I was surprised. "You want to hire me to plow for the HOA?" "Exactly. Look, I know it is ironic given everything that happened, but you have the equipment, you clearly know what you are doing, and you are reliable. What do you think?" I thought about it for a minute. It was ironic, but it also made sense. "How much are we talking about?" We would pay you $200 per storm to clear the clubhouse lot and the entrance area. Plus, if you wanted to offer your services to individual homeowners, we could put your information in the HOA newsletter. No exclusivity, no rules about who you can or cannot help. Just a straightforward business arrangement. Can I think about it? Of course. Take your time. After David left, I called Marcus to get his take on it. He thought it was a good idea as long as everything was clearly spelled out in a contract. 2 days later, I signed an agreement with the HOA to provide snow removal services for common areas. David also followed through on putting my information in the newsletter, and suddenly, I had more business than I could handle. It turned out that a lot of people in the neighborhood had been frustrated with the expensive and unreliable professional services. They were happy to hire someone local who could respond quickly. I had to turn down some requests because I could not keep up with the demand, but it felt good to be helping my community and making some extra money in the process. Karen's driveway was eventually cleared by a professional service about a week after the storm. I saw her leave in her Lexus one morning, and she did not even look in my direction. The tension between us remained, but at least it was a cold peace rather than active warfare. February brought more snow, and I stayed busy with my new side business. I was careful to keep everything above board, paying taxes on the income and maintaining proper liability insurance. The extra money was nice, but more than that, I felt like I had found my place in the community. My neighbors waved when they saw me. Kids would stop and watch me plow, and I had become known as the guy who could help when winter got rough. One evening in late February, I was clearing the clubhouse parking lot after a moderate snowfall when Karen's Lexus pulled up. She got out and walked over to me. I tensed, expecting another confrontation. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" she asked. Her tone was different, quieter. I shut off my plow. "Sure." She took a deep breath. "I owe you an apology. What I did was wrong. The way I treated you, trying to ban your snowplow, filing that police report, all of it. It was wrong, and I am sorry." I was genuinely shocked. "I appreciate you saying that. I have been doing a lot of thinking since I resigned from the HOA. My therapist says I have control issues." She laughed bitterly, which is probably obvious to everyone but me. I thought I was protecting the neighborhood, maintaining standards, but really I was just being a bully. "You stood up to me and I hated you for it, but you were right, about all of it." "Look, Karen, I know we got off on the wrong foot. That is putting it mildly," she interrupted. "Jake, I am not asking for us to be friends. I just wanted you to know that I recognize what I did was wrong. I am trying to be better. And for what it is worth, I am glad you are helping people with your plow. You have been good for this neighborhood." She turned to walk back to her car, and I called after her. "Karen, wait." She stopped and looked back. "You need help with anything? I mean, if you ever need your driveway cleared, just let me know. I will add you to my list." She smiled, and it was the first genuine smile I had ever seen from her. "Thank you. I might take you up on that." She drove off, and I stood there for a moment, processing what had just happened. It was not a complete resolution, but it felt like a step in the right direction. Sometimes people can change, and sometimes conflicts can end without anyone having to completely win or lose. March arrived, and the snow finally began to taper off. Minnesota winters are long, but they always end eventually. As the temperature slowly climbed above freezing, I started thinking about putting my snowplow away for the season. I had made about $8,000 from my snow removal work, which was going to cover a nice summer vacation and some upgrades to my house. The last storm of the season hit in mid-March, a late winter surprise that dropped about 6 inches of heavy, wet snow. I spent a full day clearing all my clients' driveways and the HOA common areas. When I finally finished, exhausted but satisfied, I drove past Karen's house and saw that her driveway was buried again. I thought about just driving past. She had not called me to ask for help, and technically, I had no obligation to her. But then, I remembered her apology, and I thought about what kind of person I wanted to be. I turned around and pulled up to her house. It took me 45 minutes to clear her driveway completely. I did not knock on her door or announce myself. I just did the work and left. But the next morning, I found an envelope in my mailbox with $400 in cash and a note that said, "Thank you for being a better person than I was. Karen." The snow finally melted in April, and Meadowbrook Heights returned to its regular routine. The grass turned green, flowers started blooming, and people traded their snowblowers for lawn mowers. I ran into Karen occasionally while walking around the neighborhood, and we would exchange polite waves. It was not friendship, but it was not hostility either. The HOA held elections in May, and David Chen was elected as the new president. He ran on a platform of common sense and less micromanagement, and he won in a landslide. One of his first acts was to review all the HOA rules and remove the ones that were outdated or overly restrictive. The neighborhood felt different, less oppressive, more like an actual community. In June, the HOA organized a neighborhood barbecue at the clubhouse. I almost did not go, but Tom Radcliffe convinced me. "You are part of this community, Jake. Come have some burgers and get to know people." The barbecue was actually fun. I met neighbors I had never talked to before, played volleyball with some of the younger families, and ate way too much potato salad. Karen was there too, helping organize the food table. We made eye contact across the crowd at one point, and she gave me a small nod. I nodded back. As the sun set and people started heading home, Tom came up to me with a beer in hand. "You did good this year, kid. Not a lot of people would have stood up to the HOA like you did. And not a lot of people would have helped everyone out during that blizzard when they did not have to." "I just did what seemed right," I said. "That is exactly my point. You did what was right, even when it was hard. That is the kind of person this neighborhood needs." As I walked home that evening, I thought about everything that had happened since I moved to Meadowbrook Heights. The conflict with the HOA, the vindictiveness, the blizzard, and eventually the resolution. It had been a wild ride, but I came out of it with a stronger sense of community and a better understanding of who I was. The following winter, when the snow started falling again, I was ready. My snowplow was maintained and tuned up, and I had a list of 30 regular clients who wanted my services. Karen was on that list. The HOA had renewed my contract for the common areas, and David Chen had even given me a key to the clubhouse so I could access the parking lot whenever needed. The first major storm of the new season hit in late November, almost exactly a year after my first confrontation with Karen. I spent the entire day clearing driveways, and when I finished, I drove through the neighborhood looking at my work. Every driveway on my list was clear. People could get to work, kids could get to school, and life could go on despite the snow. That was when I realized that the snowplow dispute had never really been about the snowplow. It had been about power, control, and community. Karen had wanted to maintain control through rigid rules and enforcement. I had wanted the freedom to maintain my property as I saw fit. But what we both learned was that community works best when people work together, when rules serve the residents rather than the other way around. I pulled into my own driveway that evening, tired but content. My snowplow sat in the garage, ready for the next storm. And I knew that when that storm came, I would be ready to help my neighbors, because that is what community is really about. The second winter in Meadowbrook Heights was different from the first. The HOA operated more smoothly under David's leadership. Disputes were handled reasonably, and there was more focus on actually improving the neighborhood rather than just enforcing arbitrary rules. The clubhouse got a new roof, the playground equipment was updated, and the entrance landscaping was redesigned to be more attractive and easier to maintain. I continued my snow removal business, and it became a regular part of my winter routine. I was no longer just the new guy who had a dispute with the HOA. I was Jake, the guy who helped clear your driveway when the snow got bad. It was a good reputation to have. Karen and I never became close friends, but we developed a mutual respect. She had sold her Lexus and bought a more practical SUV. She volunteered at the local food bank and seemed genuinely happier than when she was running the HOA with an iron fist. Sometimes people need to lose power to find themselves, and that seemed to be the case with her. One evening in January, during a particularly brutal cold snap, my snowplow broke down. A critical hydraulic line burst, and I did not have a replacement part on hand. I was in the middle of clearing the clubhouse parking lot, and I had a dozen driveways on my schedule for that evening. I was sitting in my truck, trying to figure out what to do when Karen pulled up in her SUV. "Everything okay?" she asked through her window. "Hydraulic line burst. I am dead in the water until I can get a replacement part." She thought for a moment. "I have a friend who owns an equipment repair shop over in Byron. Let me make a call." 10 minutes later, she had arranged for her friend to open up his shop after hours so I could get the part I needed. She even drove me there in her SUV while my truck and plow sat in the clubhouse parking lot. On the drive, we actually talked, really talked for the first time. "I have been thinking about that whole snowplow thing," she said. "You know what the really crazy part was? I did not even care about the snowplow. I mean, it did not bother me at all. But you were new, and you were not following what I thought were the rules, and I just could not let it go. It was like an obsession." "What changed?" I asked. "Therapy, mostly, and losing the HOA presidency. That was humiliating, having to resign in front of everyone. But it forced me to look at why I was acting the way I was. Turns out I have spent most of my life trying to control everything around me because I felt so out of control inside. Controlling the HOA, enforcing rules, all of that gave me a sense of power that I confused with purpose." "That is pretty self-aware," I said. "Yeah, well, $90 an hour for therapy will do that to you." She laughed. "But seriously, I am trying to be better. I know I will never be everyone's favorite person in the neighborhood, and that is okay. I just want to be a decent person who does not make other people's lives harder." We got the hydraulic line, and she drove me back to the clubhouse. I fixed my plow and finished my work that evening, running a couple hours behind schedule but still getting everyone cleared. The next morning I found a text from Karen. "Glad you got your plow fixed. See you around." It was a small thing, but it felt significant. We had gone from adversaries to something like allies, maybe even the beginnings of friends. Life is funny that way. The people who drive you the craziest sometimes end up teaching you the most about yourself. February brought another major storm, though not as severe as the blizzard from the previous year. This time, the neighborhood was better prepared. More people had backup plans. Several residents had purchased their own snow removal equipment, and there was a general sense that we were all in it together. I was clearing the entrance to the neighborhood when a van pulled up with a camera crew inside. A reporter got out, a woman in her 30s with perfect makeup despite the freezing temperature. "Are you Jake Brennan?" she asked. "That is me," I said cautiously. "I am Linda Martinez from KTTC News. We are doing a story about how communities are handling the snow this winter, and someone mentioned that you have quite an interesting story. Would you be willing to do an interview? I was not really interested in being on the news, but Tom had been encouraging me to get more publicity for my snow removal business. Sure, I guess. The interview was short and focused on how I had started helping neighbors during the blizzard last year and how it had turned into a small business. I mentioned the initial dispute with the HOA but kept it vague, not wanting to throw Karen under the bus publicly. The story aired the next evening during the local news. The response was immediate. My phone started ringing with people from other neighborhoods asking if I provided services in their area. I had to turn down most of them because I did not have the capacity, but it made me think about potentially expanding. Maybe hiring someone to help, getting a second plow. It was exciting to think about the possibilities. The rest of the winter passed without major incident. March brought the usual late-season snows, and by April, we were all ready for spring. I had made almost $12,000 from my snow removal work that season, and I was seriously considering making it a more formal business. David Chen approached me at the neighborhood barbecue in May with an interesting proposal. "Jake, the board has been talking, and we would like to offer you a position as the HOA's official snow removal contractor. Not just for the common areas, but we would also promote your services to all residents and negotiate a group rate. You would handle all snow removal for anyone in the neighborhood who signs up. What do you think?" It was a big opportunity. That would be a lot of work. I would probably need to hire help. We figured. The thing is, last winter showed us that having someone local and reliable is worth a lot. We want to support that. Think about it and let me know. I spent the spring and summer building up my business. I hired 2 part-time employees, both college kids who needed winter work. I bought a second plow and got all the necessary licenses and insurance to operate as a legitimate business. By the time November rolled around, I was ready to take on the entire neighborhood. The contract with the HOA was signed in October. Any resident who wanted my services could sign up for a seasonal rate of $800, which covered unlimited snow removal for the entire winter. About 60% of the neighborhood signed up, which was more than enough to make it worthwhile. The HOA covered the cost for the common areas and the entrance. Karen was one of my seasonal clients. She paid up front and even helped me recruit other residents by putting in a good word. It was surreal to think about how much things had changed in just 2 years. The third winter in Meadowbrook Heights was the smoothest yet. My team and I had a system down. Whenever snow was in the forecast, we would prep the equipment. As soon as the snow stopped, we would mobilize and clear all the signed-up driveways in a coordinated route. The whole neighborhood could be done in about 6 hours, depending on the amount of snow. It was not just about the money, though the business was doing well. It was about being part of something bigger than myself. Every time I cleared someone's driveway, I was helping them get to work, get their kids to school, get to medical appointments. I was making their lives easier in a small but meaningful way. In January of that third winter, we got hit with another major blizzard. The Weather Service was calling it a once-in-a-decade storm, with predictions of up to 30 inches of snow. The whole city of Rochester basically shut down for 2 days while the storm raged. When it finally passed, the neighborhood was buried even worse than the first big blizzard. But this time, I had a team and a plan. We worked around the clock for 2 straight days, clearing every driveway in the neighborhood. The 2 college kids I hired were troopers, never complaining despite the brutal cold and exhausting work. When we finally finished, I drove through the neighborhood one last time. Every single driveway was clear. People were out with their kids, building snowmen and having snowball fights. The neighborhood felt alive despite being buried in snow, and I had played a part in making that possible. I was exhausted and ready to sleep for about 12 hours straight, but first I stopped at the clubhouse. The board had left a key for me, and I wanted to make sure the parking lot was perfect. As I was doing a final pass, I saw Karen's SUV pull up. She got out and walked over to my truck. I rolled down the window. "You and your crew did an amazing job," she said. "The whole neighborhood is talking about it. You really came through." "Just doing what I am paid to do," I said, though I was pleased. "It is more than that. You built something here, a real business, a real service that people depend on, and you did it with integrity and hard work. I just wanted you to know that I see that and I respect it." "Thanks, Karen. That means a lot." She started to walk away, then turned back. "You know, I have been thinking about that day I tried to ban your snowplow. If I could go back and change it, I would. But then again, if that had not happened, maybe none of this would have happened either. Maybe you needed that conflict to push you into building this business. Funny how things work out." "Yeah," I agreed. "Funny how things work out." She drove off, and I finished my final pass of the parking lot. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the snow. I thought about everything that had happened since I moved to Meadowbrook Heights. The conflict, the growth, the community building. It had all led to this moment, sitting in my truck, looking at a neighborhood I had helped keep moving during one of the worst winters in years. That evening, I got home and collapsed on my couch. My phone was full of thank you texts from neighbors. Tom Radcliffe had sent a message saying I deserved a medal. David Chen texted that the HOA board wanted to give me a community service award at the next meeting. Even Karen had sent a text. "Thank you for everything. You made a real difference." I fell asleep on that couch, still in my winter gear, more tired than I had ever been but also more satisfied. I had found my place in this community and it felt good. The winter eventually ended, as Minnesota winters always do. The snow melted, the grass turned green, and life returned to its normal rhythm. My snow removal business went into hibernation, but I knew it would be back when November rolled around again. That summer, the neighborhood threw a block party to celebrate making it through another brutal winter. I was recognized with that community service award David had mentioned, which was a nice wooden plaque that I hung in my garage. More importantly, I spent the evening talking with neighbors, laughing about the crazy winter we had survived, and making plans for the next one. Karen was there too, helping organize the food just like the previous year. At one point, we found ourselves standing near the grill, watching kids run around playing tag. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" she asked. "What do you mean?" "If I had not been such a control freak about your snowplow. If you had just given up and used a shovel like I demanded. None of this would have happened. Your business, the whole neighborhood coming together, none of it." "Maybe," I said, "or maybe something else would have sparked it. I think when you put good people in a community, good things eventually happen. It might have taken a different path, but I think we would have ended up somewhere good regardless." She smiled. "You are more optimistic than I am." "I have reason to be," I said, gesturing at the party around us. "Look at this. Look at what we built. This is a real community, Karen, people helping each other, supporting each other. That is worth celebrating." "Yeah," she agreed softly. "It really is." The party went on until dark, and when I finally walked home, I felt a deep sense of contentment. I had moved to Meadowbrook Heights looking for a place to live, but I had found something more. I had found a community, a purpose, and a reminder that even conflicts can lead to growth if you approach them the right way. The years that followed continued in much the same pattern. Winters came with their snow and cold, and my business was there to help the neighborhood through it. I expanded gradually, adding more equipment and employees. Eventually, I was serving 3 different neighborhoods in the Rochester area, but Meadowbrook Heights always remained my home base and my priority. Karen and I became actual friends over time. She never returned to the HOA board, but she found other ways to contribute to the community. She organized fundraisers for local charities, started a neighborhood book club, and volunteered at the elementary school. She was using her organizational skills for good rather than control, and it suited her much better. David Chen served as HOA president for 4 years before stepping down and handing the role to someone else. Under his leadership, the HOA had transformed from a source of frustration into an actual asset for the neighborhood. Rules were reasonable and enforced fairly. Disputes were handled with common sense. The community thrived. Tom Radcliffe remained one of my closest friends in the neighborhood. He loved to tell the story of the snowplow dispute to anyone who would listen, always ending it with, "And that is why you should never mess with a man and his plow." It became something of a legend in Meadowbrook Heights, the tale of how one stubborn homeowner stood up to an overreaching HOA and ended up transforming the entire community. Looking back on it all now, I realize that the whole experience taught me something important about conflict and community. When Karen first confronted me about my snowplow, I could have just given in. It would have been easier to avoid the fight, to just use a shovel or hire a service like everyone else. But by standing my ground, by insisting on doing what I knew was right, I forced a change that benefited everyone. The conflict was necessary. It exposed the problems with how the HOA was being run. It brought neighbors together who had been silently frustrated for years. It created an opportunity for me to build something meaningful. Sometimes you need friction to create change, and sometimes the person causing you the most problems is actually giving you the push you need to become who you are meant to be. That does not mean Karen was right to do what she did. The harassment, the fines, the false police report, those were all wrong, and she had to face consequences for her actions. But her eventual apology and transformation showed that people can grow and change if they are willing to do the hard work of self-reflection. As for me, I never expected that a snowplow would become the defining element of my life in Meadowbrook Heights. I bought it for practical reasons, to maintain my property during Minnesota winters, but it became so much more than that. It became a symbol of standing up for what is right, of serving your community, and of turning conflict into opportunity. The snowplow still sits in my garage, ready for the next storm. Every time I look at it, I remember that first confrontation with Karen, standing in the cold November morning, being told I could not use my own equipment on my own property. I remember the anger and frustration, but I also remember the determination to not back down. That determination changed my life. It gave me a business, a purpose, and a deeper connection to my community. It taught me that sometimes the right path is not the easy path, and that standing up to bullies, even bullies with official titles and legal-sounding documents, is worth the effort. Meadowbrook Heights is home now in a way I never expected when I first moved here. These are not just the people who live near me. They are my community, my friends, my clients. We have been through blizzards together, both literal and metaphorical. We have learned to support each other, to work together, to be better neighbors. And it all started because Karen Hutchins tried to ban my snowplow. Life is funny that way. The obstacles that seem impossible in the moment often turn out to be exactly what you needed to push you toward your true path. The conflicts that feel overwhelming often create opportunities for growth and change that never would have happened otherwise. So here I am, years later, sitting in my home in Meadowbrook Heights, writing down this story because people keep asking me about it. They want to know how one guy with a snowplow took on an HOA and won. But that is not really what this story is about. This is a story about community, about standing up for what is right, and about how sometimes the worst conflicts lead to the best outcomes. The next winter will come, as Minnesota winters always do. The snow will fall, the temperatures will drop, and my phone will start ringing with people who need their driveways cleared. I will fire up my snowplow, call my crew, and we will get to work. Because that is what we do. We keep the neighborhood moving, one driveway at a time. And somewhere in that neighborhood, Karen Hutchins will be going about her day, maybe volunteering at the food bank or organizing another fundraiser. She will see me driving past with my snowplow, and she will wave. I will wave back. And we will both smile, knowing that we came out the other side of a difficult conflict as better people. That is the real victory here. Not that I won the right to use my snowplow, though that is nice. Not that I built a successful business, though that is rewarding. The real victory is that a community came together, learned to communicate better, and created something stronger than what existed before. Meadowbrook Heights is not perfect. No community is. We still have disputes, disagreements, and the occasional problem neighbor. But we have learned how to handle those challenges in a constructive way. We talk to each other. We try to understand different perspectives. We focus on finding solutions rather than asserting power. And when the snow falls and the winds howl and Minnesota shows us why it is called the frozen north, we look out for each other. We make sure the elderly neighbors are okay. We check on the new families who are not used to harsh winters. We work together to keep everyone safe and warm. That is what community is really about. Not rules and regulations and perfectly maintained properties. Those things have their place, but they are not the heart of what makes a neighborhood work. The heart is people caring about people, helping when help is needed, and building something together that is bigger than any individual. My snowplow helped me understand that. It was just a tool, a piece of equipment designed to move snow from one place to another. But it became a catalyst for change, a symbol of resistance against unreasonable authority, and ultimately a means of serving others. I think about that first winter a lot, about standing in the cold facing down Karen's demands, about the choice I had to make. I could have taken the easy path. I could have avoided the conflict, but I am glad I did not. I am glad I stood my ground, fought for what was right, and saw it through to the end, because that choice led me here, to this life I have built in Meadowbrook Heights. A life where I know my neighbors and they know me. A life where I have a purpose beyond just going to work and paying bills. A life where I make a real difference, even if it is just clearing snow from driveways. That is what I want people to take away from this story. Not that HOAs are bad, though some certainly are. Not that you should always fight every battle, though some battles are worth fighting. What I want people to understand is that standing up for what is right, even when it is difficult, can lead to outcomes you never imagined. Karen thought she was protecting the neighborhood by banning my snowplow. She thought strict enforcement of rules was the same as good leadership. She was wrong, and the conflict that resulted from her wrongness ended up making the neighborhood better than it ever was under her strict control. Sometimes the people who cause us the most problems are actually giving us the greatest opportunities for growth. Sometimes the conflicts we want to avoid are exactly what we need to face. And sometimes a simple snowplow can teach you everything you need to know about community, courage, and the importance of standing your ground. The story does not really have an ending, because life in Meadowbrook Heights continues. Next winter will bring new challenges, new storms, new opportunities to serve my community. But this chapter, the chapter that started with Karen demanding I stop using my snowplow and ended with us working together for the good of the neighborhood, this chapter is complete. And what a chapter it has been. Full of conflict and resolution, anger and understanding, winter storms and spring thaws. It has been a journey that changed me in ways I could not have predicted. I came to Meadowbrook Heights as a new homeowner looking for a place to settle down. I am leaving this chapter as a business owner, a community member, and someone who learned that standing up to bullies is always worth it, even when it is hard, especially when it is hard.